Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show. On today's episode, I'm excited to be discussing an essential area of how a remarkable customer experience can be your best marketing. Today's influencer guest is Dan Gingiss, the founder of Winning Customer Experience. And Dan is based out of Chicago. So welcome to the show, Dan. It's amazing and it's an honor to have you on the show.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. It's an honor to be here. I'm really excited to chat with you about one of my favorite topics in the world, which is how a remarkable customer experience can become your very best marketing.
Absolutely. And I think that, it's so sad to see so many companies, focusing and prioritizing other initiatives over customer experience. And I see it a lot in our agency. I see it in our ventures business where, it's such a buyer-centric economy and the customer is at the center of everything that we do. And I see it all the time where companies just focus on their own agendas, and that usually entails, them wanting to sell you something. Over, working and creating that amazing experience that's going to delight you, create that unforgettable experience. For you guys listening on the podcast, we appreciate you tuning in today. And I just want you to take a step out. I'm not saying pull over in the car into the lay-by, but just hit the pause button and think about what your customer experience is like. Because ultimately, if you're not turning customers into advocates and providing an all-round experience. And by the way, guys, that's not just through the sales cycle. That's a lot longer than that, and that's throughout the full journey. Here in our agency, we've got what we call, Dan, a wall of appreciation. And all the major players, the original, as well as some more modern sort of influencers who have come up with quotes that's really inspired us. And from a customer service point of view, nobody does dollars like Disney to a degree, as I always say. And we have a Walt Disney quote on there, and that is, do what you do so well that they'll want to see it again and bring the friends, quoted to Walt Disney. And I think to me, out of all the customer experience books, I know there's various ones, from Challenger Sale and all sorts of bits and bobs like that. And I see on the articles that you feature with Forbes, I think they did a blog around sort of 5 awesome books around customer experience. But for me, if you can, enlighten your customers, you can do it so well, whatever you do, that they want to keep coming back and back and back and even tell their friends about it, then hopefully you're on the right track to make that happen. And I'm really looking forward to learning from you today, Dan, and, expanding on that. But I'd love to get, just slightly off script, but I'd love to get your view on that Walt Disney quote of do what you do so well that they'll want to see it again and bring the friends. Does that resonate in all the talks and the keynotes that you do? Do you use a lot of reference to Disney, or have you got a different angle that you reference, for customer experience?
Well, the quote is a great one. And, I phrase it a slightly different way in simply saying that the reason why customer experience can be your best marketing is that when you have your own customers telling their friends and family on social media, in real life, whatever it is, they're so much more credible as marketers than you are as a brand. And there's been lots of studies that have shown that, the least trustworthy is the brand. Right after that is the CEO of the brand. Right. And then employees of the brand are more trustworthy, but the most trustworthy are friends and family. And so when you have other people talking about how great you are, it's actually going to help those sales. And you made a great point before that there's so much focus on sales and bringing in new customers that we forget that there's this leaky bucket on the other side where our customers are leaving because we're not providing them with a good experience. And I think we all know it's a lot less expensive to keep a customer than it is to acquire a new one. And so I think what companies have to do in the spirit of Disney is really focus on making that experience so great that nobody wants to leave and they want to bring their friends with them.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'm not sure if you have this in the States, Dan, but over here in the UK, a lot of the insurance companies, so I'm talking about car insurance in specifically, that, there's always cheaper rates for new customers than there is actually for existing customers. And I'm one of those guys, careful driver, about 15 years, no claims, but I think caps out about 9 years. But it's really funny. Aviva, a major player in the insurance market here in the UK, they've just run a TV commercial. over the summer. And it's a bit like a James Bond villain lair thing. And this guy, you can see he's got this wig on and he's got these false glasses and these teeth that protrude out. And there's this really sort of like Dr. Evil guy who was the insurance guy. And he goes, I know you. And he goes, you're a, and then the customer says, I'm a new customer. And he goes, you're an existing customer. And as if he's like penalizing the existing customer, because he was trying to get a better deal as a new customer. And the moral of the advert and the moral of the commercial is that Aviva now are giving their existing customers the same or better rates that they're giving the new customers. And what I find amazing is that it's taken the car insurance companies in the age of the internet, which is the last 20 years or so, and more prominently over the last 10 or 15, but it's taken them that long to sort of come around to say, hey, you've been with us for 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is, you're a good driver, you could have a better rate than the new person off the street. And it just seems false economy that they've taken that long to do it. And as I say, I don't know if you've got any examples around that where you see it, where customers treat maybe less loyal new customers who are sometimes just buying a deal more than loyalty. And then for me as what I class myself as a good insurance customer, not having any claims, I don't bother them, I pay my premiums on time, but I'm now getting a better or same deal. But I just find it amazing that customers, globally, are just so poor at that. And I'd love to get your view on it and maybe, see why you think that is.
Well, first of all, definitely the same trend in the United States as well. And I do think that it has to change. I like to say that competing on price is a loser's game because, first of all, you and your competitor are going to keep lowering prices until nobody's making money. That's the first thing.
Race to the bottom.
Yep. Competing on product is really difficult because, let's face it, car insurance is car insurance for the most part. So you're selling the same product. So what's left, you compete on experience. Yeah. And the problem is when you keep offering these low starter rates, you're asking your customers to choose based on price. And so, of course, you're attracting customers that are price sensitive and that as soon as they find a better price somewhere else are going to leave. So it's not a good business model. No. Here in the US, I was talking to a major cable TV company. And I'm a customer. And every year I do the same thing. And so do millions of customers. I call up and I say, my rates are too high. Right? And it's like the same conversation every year. The agent says, oh, well, we could put you on a different service. And I say, well, what would I get for that service? And she says, well, you get exactly the same thing as you have today. I said, oh, okay, well, what's the price of that one? Well, it's $20 less per month. To which I say, well, why haven't I been on that one? And so she'll move me and I'll save the $20. So what I said to an executive at this company is, if just once you would call me and say, Dan, we've identified that you're paying $20 too much per month. So we've lowered you down to the program that's $20 cheaper. You get the same service. I said, you would make a customer for life because I would know that you had my back and I would return that favor with my loyalty. Which is exactly what you refer
as well. That's a topic of conversation around the restaurant when your friends come over. Hey, guess what? I got a call today because it's so unusual, isn't it? It's not an obvious one, and you're right. It's amazing how they don't do that. And I'm sure it's a lot more than just. I'm sure it's just a lot more than cable companies as well, isn't it?
For sure, it does. It happens all the time, and it's. Companies have to value their existing customers because today's customers are more demanding and frankly more fickle and more willing to pick up and move to a competitor. And so you have to pay attention to your existing customers and not just focus on acquiring new ones. But as I said before too, if you balance that out a little bit better, you won't have to acquire as many new ones. You won't have to work as hard for sales because number one, you won't have the leaky bucket. And number two, you'll have your existing customers bringing on other customers. So your sales force can actually relax a little bit and it doesn't have to be this constant, never-ending stream of sales goals every month or every quarter or whatever that are harder and harder to hit as we move forward.
It makes sense. And they're both, that little intro there is a great example, of how a remarkable customer experience can be, your best marketing. Now, for you guys listening and gals listening, if you want to connect with Dan, you can find him on Twitter at Dan Gingiss. You can get him on LinkedIn, again, with his name after the extension, on Instagram and the website at dangingiss.com. For those listening, we'll put those on the app, on the show notes, and we'll put all the links to the file there. You can also search the hashtags customer experience, CX, customer service, marketing, social media. You're going to pick up Dan's amazing work there. For those of you going out to Inbound this year, Dan's a speaker at Inbound 2019. So looking forward to checking in with you there, Dan. And what days are you on throughout the full week at Inbound, or are you just in for a few sessions?
I will be there for the full week, and I want to just jump back for a second, Mike. My Twitter handle is actually dgingiss.
I do apologize. I can see it.
That's okay. If you go to Dan Gingiss, I own that one too, but there's no content there, so it'll be a really boring one to follow.
Gingiss, we'll make sure. I'm looking at that on the show book. For those who are watching me, I'm leaking here as well. It's like one of the hottest summers in the UK. So we're like 30 odd degrees in the studio. I think my mind's gone a little bit warped there, Dan, but absolutely great. So D Gingiss at Twitter, and of course we will put those links between the show notes. So you're there at Inbound all week? Yeah?
Yes, I'm going to be at Inbound all week. It's a fantastic conference. Almost 30,000 marketers are going to be there. I'm doing a big presentation on Thursday. I'm super excited. It's sold out at I think I'm in a room of 1,000 people, so that's really exciting. And then I'm doing an encore presentation the next day, Friday. So it should be a lot of fun. And I, of course, love attending sessions as well. I live tweet during events like this because it's my way of taking notes. And then usually I go back to my tweets and read them and create a blog post off of them.
So great idea.
It's just a fun way to experience a show.
Do you know what? And I always sort of stop the influencers when something profound comes out. One of the most popular questions I get asked, Danny, is, Mike, I struggle to create content sometimes. And even with a content strategy, I sometimes get holes in there. But that's a great little tip that you've just come up with there. Wherever you are, put some live tweets out there, revisit it later on, create a blog post out of it. Fantastic. Great.
Absolutely. I'll give you another pro tip as long as we're on the topic, because I just figured this one out. I'm sure your listeners are smarter than I am. But if you use Google Docs in any form, there is a free voice to text functionality. And what I have found is that by just opening up a Google Doc and starting to talk, I can get 80% of a blog post done in a couple of minutes. And I'm a pretty fast typist, but it just, for whatever reason, my brain works differently when I'm talking, and I get more out than when I'm thinking about every sentence that I'm going to type. So I've started to create blog posts that way, and it's allowed me to create a lot more content a lot more quickly.
Yeah, that's great. And so Google Docs is the way with the voice speech. For me, Dan, I don't use that technique, but I will try it. For me, I just love to turn a camera on and just talk through it, get we've got the framework of the blog out, the intro, whether it's the problem, agitation, solution, whatever, then work through it and then sample it. I just love to talk it out, stick it into rev.com and then just translate it back, and then it'll come back transcribed. A few inaudibles aside, and like you say, it's another great way of just churning it out, but keeping it on content and point from there. So, but that Google Docs, we'll give that a try for sure, and thank you very much indeed for sharing that. It's a great tip. Thank you. So before we get kicked off, let's learn a little bit more about Dan. His journey's pretty impressive. I'll let Dan do most of it, but Dan's career spans over 20 years. As he's consistently focused on delighting customers, spanning multiple disciplines from customer experience, marketing, social media, the customer service elements that we talked about earlier. And just to sort of get started, Dan, really, what's the standout moment for you? Highs or lows, because a lot of people hear the successes, but there's a lot of bumps along the way, isn't there, with the lows? And I suppose what's the one standout moment that's contributed, to where you are today over the last 20 years?
Well, actually, it's a moment that happened in my first job out of college, and I talk about this in the introduction to my book, but I worked for a high-end collectibles company that sells plates, dolls, figurines, sports memorabilia, that sort of thing. And I was running a bunch of product lines, and I was in the marketing department. But one time around the holidays, a call came through that was supposed to go to customer service, and I have no idea why it came to my desk. So I pick it up, and there's this distraught woman on the other line, and she has ordered a product for her granddaughter for Christmas. It's December 23rd. She doesn't have the product. We're ruining Christmas. What can I do? And I wasn't a customer service agent, so I didn't have access to her account. I couldn't really see anything. So I just kind of did what came naturally to a 23-year-old at the time. And I said, all right, I took out a piece of paper and a pen, and I said, what's your name? What's your address? What's the product? We had a little conversation, and I said, I can't remember her name, but I said, ma'am, Christmas is not going to be ruined on my account. I promise you that item's going to be sitting at your doorstep tomorrow. Oh, thank you so much. You're so great. So we hang up, and I'm like, okay, I better figure out how to do this. And so I actually walked over to the warehouse. I picked the item out of the warehouse myself. I brought it over to the packing station. I put in the peanuts. I packed it up, taped it up myself. I brought it over to the FedEx station, got the label, made sure it was overnight and for delivery on December 24th. And nobody had told me to do that, right? And I don't know, maybe I broke a company rule. I have no idea. But it just seemed like it was the right thing to do to make a customer happy. And that woman was happy, and she continued to be a customer, which is important to note because she started off very angry, right? She called because we were ruining Christmas. And I was able to turn that around for her. And that really stuck in my mind as I've pursued my career at a lot of much bigger companies than that, trying to always have the customer hat on, to be wearing the customer hat when I'm in a meeting or in a conference room so that the customer's voice is there. And one thing that's actually a step up from that, the same cable company I was talking to you about, they're now putting empty chairs in all of their conference rooms and their executive offices that say customer on them. And the idea is to make sure that you're always paying attention to the customer in the room, even when they're not there. And I think that's a strategy that I've used my whole career to try to figure out, obviously, you have to make money, the company has to be profitable, but when you're trying to make decisions and you're incorporating the customer into that decision, generally you end up with both a better experience and more profit.
That's great. And I think the standout sentence to me, Dan, and thanks for sharing that, is amazing. And, maybe you did it as a, you emphasized it, but it's the right thing to do. And I think in so many businesses today, it's, the process is this. And, I'm all for systems, I'm all for processes. You'll understand that from your McDonald's days as well, of course. But sometimes the rule book has to go out of the window. And sometimes common sense seems to be short in a lot of businesses. And sometimes the larger that they get, the common sense seems to go. And, when you're onto a winner because you'll know yourself, whether it's your cable company, your software company, your IT company. When you ring them, you're thinking like, I've got to ring these people. I've got to go through a moronic call center or a moronic IVR system. Then to get treated with contempt, to be told it's 48, 72 hours or whatever. And then other times you'll have experiences where you think, I know these guys are going to sort it. If it's physically doable, and there's oxygen in the air and the sun comes up tomorrow morning, they'll do everything possible. And it's amazing how you then sort of will go back and pay more with those companies because, in today's, we're all time pressured, aren't we? We're all, time's a commodity, it's precious, we've got a lot of things to do with it. And for me, I know certainly, I would certainly pay, depends on the ticket price of the item or the service, but, well, that's 10, 15, 20% more for a company who provides that focused service to the client over the ones who are just providing a product or a service at a price. And, I think that if we could all look at it that way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop me a message on Twitter, use the hashtag #TheOpenMic or leave a comment below. How much would you guys pay the listeners more percentage like for like to get what I would call world-class service or that, the right thing to do service? I'd really love to sort of get your comments on that.
And Mike, I think a great example of that out in the real world right now is Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Because, I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where people have said, well, we just need to figure out how to be like Amazon Prime, right? Where people get that bill and they don't even think about paying it every year because it has so much value. And they've raised the price twice, at least in the United States, and nobody blinks because it's so worth it. And and that, in order to create that, you have to have the service behind it, right? So I ordered a set of pots and pans from Amazon recently, and it was a big set, and it came with the pots and pans and these lids, these glass lids. And one of the glass lids showed up broken. It was shattered. And so I called up Amazon, and my request of them was, can I get a replacement lid? That's all I wanted, right? The lady on the other line immediately says, I'm going to refund the entire purchase, and I want you to keep the pots and pans. And it was amazing, because now all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I could probably live without the lid, because I just got a free pot and pan set. But that's why people love Amazon so much, because their service also is, they back it up. It's not just low price. It's not just fast delivery. But when you have a problem, they make it really easy to resolve. And I think that is, if you want to be like Amazon, if you want to have a recurring revenue stream like Prime, and if you want people to pay more, which is what they're doing, you just asked your audience, how much would you pay more? People pay more for Prime, but they do it willingly and gladly because they get so much value from it.
They do. It's really funny. You reminded me something there about your cable company, about, could you put me on a lower plan? Only last week, Dan, I got a letter from Amazon, a direct mail letter, and it said, "Dear Mr. Midgley, we are noticing you are not taking advantage of your Prime Video service. Did you know you get all this?" And for you tennis fans out there, Amazon have just done a major sponsor for the US Open on the tennis. So you can watch US Open subscription free on, well, it's subscription free if you're an Amazon Prime sort of subscriber, but you don't have to buy it on Fox or CNN or Sky or anything like that. So they've just done a major deal. But they actually wrote out to me, said, hey, you're not even using Amazon Prime Video. Here are all the benefits, here are all the TV shows, here are that. So that's another great way of just adding that extra value, so they know you're absolutely rinsing out the absolute maximum value of the Prime membership. And what I also love about Prime, Dan, is when you go on the screen and it says, you can also buy this item cheaper from these other sellers, non-Prime. So you click on them and you think, no Prime, no Prime. Will it turn up? Will it show up? Blah, blah, blah. You think, no, I'll go back and I'll pay a little bit more.
It's like they're daring you, right? If you want to take the risk, you can try this.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So just a little bit more about Dan. He's held leadership positions at 3 Fortune 300 companies, McDonald's, Discover, and Humana. In your opinion, Dan, I suppose the question I've got for you is, what do the Fortune companies get right or wrong around customer experience? And, for the positives, what can smaller companies learn from these? Either avoid the wrongs or practice the rights. Just talk to us a little bit more about that. You've seen it from a small consultancy, to the great stuff that you're doing today, to the Fortune 300s. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? And what can we learn from them?
Well, I mean, obviously the Fortune companies have a significant advantage in resources and money that oftentimes small businesses don't have, but they have a significant disadvantage in infrastructure and I would say organizational structure, right? So I actually think that smaller companies have a better chance at succeeding at customer experience more quickly than do large companies, because sometimes it's really hard to turn a giant ship around, which is what it feels like when you're at a Fortune 300 company. The biggest problem with the big companies is a siloed organization. And so you have, for example, the sales and marketing teams separated, or you have the marketing and customer service teams separated. Even within subsections like social media, you'll have the social media marketing and the social media service team separated. They have different goals, they have different leadership. And the problem with that is that the customer experiences them as one. The customer looks at your company as a single organization, a single brand. They don't frankly care how you're organized. And so when organizational structures affect the customer experience, it's usually in a negative way. Even if I manage a particular silo and I make that experience really great for the customer, I'm not in control of what happens before or what happens after that experience.
Like the full journey. Yeah, you're just in that postage stamp of that silo.
Exactly. So you tend to get a very choppy experience. I think with smaller companies, they don't tend to have as many departments, as big of an org chart, so it's a little bit easier to kind of get everybody in a room and say, okay, here's what we're all going to agree on and what we want this journey to look like. And now everybody break and go do your part. So I think that, that said, obviously there are some big companies that are doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
And I think it is the ones that are starting to put different departments together. I think it's super interesting that there's pretty much two models that I've seen. The first is establishing a CXO or a chief experience officer that has the job of overseeing the entire customer journey, no matter who operates it or who manages it.
As it flows in between departments, you're talking here. So from sales to marketing, sales, onboarding through to the delivery and then management from there. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the other model that I'm seeing is that customer experience is getting put under the CMO. Yeah. And I think that's also a workable model, in particular because marketing, especially in consumer organizations, tends to be the heartbeat of the whole company. Yeah. And so if marketing is held responsible for experience, then you start to play, you alleviate that tension that you were talking about before of, well, do we offer a better deal for new customers or do we focus on the existing customer? Because if the same department now is responsible for both, you can alleviate that tension. So I think those are the two models that I'm seeing, both of which seem to be okay. And again, I think small companies, you're not going to be able to compete on price because it's a loser's game, whether you're competing with other small companies or whether you're competing with Amazon or a big company. Competing on product is always hard unless you have a truly unique IP that can't be copied. And so the difference maker is going to be experience. And I think with smaller companies, that's easier to execute if you really focus on it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love the two model analogy you give there. That's real good. And I think, for the listeners out there, whether you're getting off the tracks and, you're growing your startup, you've got a more established sort of play. Just think about it. You're in control of those departments. Like you say, usually you've got an MD or a CEO, a board of directors. It's in your hands. It's in your control to sort of paintbrush that experience from even prior to, but all the way through and then beyond. And just think of the challenges that those big companies have. Like you say, somebody like Dan working in one of the the big Fortune 300s before, busting his gut really to make that experience happen for the next guy or gal to sort of I'm not saying not give a damn, because these guys do a great job, but they don't give a damn, and then all that good work gets dropped down. And I don't know if you've had it done, and I've certainly had it in the businesses that I've run before, is that a customer said to me, "Oh, Mike, I'm so glad it's you I've spoken to, because I know you'll get it done, whereas your colleagues on this desk or that department." And I wrote a blog post called "Working on the Checkout." It's in our community. It's on the blog as well. And one of my old NXDs, he was actually the chief exec of Wix, FTSE 100 company, the DIY chain, Asda, British Gas, serial FTSE 100 chairman. And when he retired, Dan, he came and sort of took me under his wing, and I was so fortunate to learn so much off Bill. And he told me this story about how even as the chief exec of Wix, he's a 7-figure salary in the 90s, millions of pounds base salary plus bonus in the 90s. And he used to go one day a week, and he used to go and sit in a store, and he used to go sit on the checkout, and he used to put the blip, 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 and he's going through there. And he used to listen to all the people. And of course, we've always been to these hardware stores, and we see the retired people on the counters, and we think, maybe, he's been made redundant. Maybe, he's lost his family and he's just keeping busy. And I always pictured Bill, grey hair, sat out there. He's the £1.2 million basic salary chief exec of Wix, blipping these items through the checkout, but he did it one day a month at different stores. So he was listening, and so many initiatives about cement and plasterboards and how he turned stores around. And so I was so inspired about that. I actually wrote a blog post called "Working on the Checkout," and why leaders should always go and work on the front line and listen to what the customers are saying. And then you could start to improve some, fill some holes or just create those gaps. Fill those gaps that's been created. And, just being on the front line, you'll learn so much. And it's a strategy that I've always sort of stuck around with. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can go to blog.thesuccessof.io. Just search "Working on the Checkout." You'll pick that blog up there. And let me know what your thoughts are. And if it's good enough for the chief exec of Wix, it's good enough for you and I. That's what I always say. But a little bit more about Dan. Dan today is an international keynote speaker. highly regarded and experienced consultant who believes that remarkable customer experience, as we've said earlier, can be your best marketing. Tell us a little bit more about speaking career. I know we touched on inbound earlier, Dan, but tell us a little bit more about that speaking career. I know you speak to some amazing audiences, and just share with some of those experiences and what you get out of it and what you try and deliver your audiences.
Sure. Well, I broke out on my own at the beginning of 2019, and obviously it was a big career jump and a little bit of a risk, but it was something that I knew I had to do. I had been sort of doing a side hustle for 4 or 5 years with my blogging and podcasting and speaking, and I kept coming back to it because I realized it was what I loved doing. And I do think it is so important that you love your work, because we spend so much time at work and so much time away from our families that we might as well enjoy what we're doing. So I am really enjoying being a professional speaker. I love to, because I talk about creating experiences, it's really important to me that I create an experience for the audience. So I bring in some surprises into my presentation that are I'm not going to tell you, otherwise they wouldn't be a surprise, but that are meant to be different and memorable. And so I'm walking the walk. I'm demonstrating what it is that I'm teaching audiences to do. I'm also demonstrating that it's not very hard or expensive. So I focus only on examples that are inexpensive, practical, and simple for really any kind of a company, which is why you asked me before whether I reference Disney a lot. I actually don't reference large companies that much, because most of the time when I do, somebody says, well, that's great, but I couldn't possibly do that at my business. Of
course. It could be a negative stigma. I get it.
Yeah. So I try to focus on really simple things. I love, for example, I always have my camera out taking pictures of signage, because I think signage is so critical to any business that has any sort of storefront or physical presence, because it's talking to your customers. It's often the first thing that they see. And it's funny, I've got some really great signage. I've got some really unfortunate signage, but it all sets the tone for the experience, and it's super easy to change. So you can, one of the things I talk about on stage is this idea of trying to be witty, and witty doesn't mean being humorous. It doesn't mean telling jokes. It just means taking the language that you use and turning it just a little bit to be either memorable or to cause a chuckle or to cause a smile. It doesn't have to be a laugh out loud, but something that just gets people's attention. And it often can be 1 or 2 words that you change on a sign or in a sentence or whatever that makes the difference. So I really enjoy speaking. I always am paying attention also to my customers, which is the audience. I'm always looking at people to see which of my stories are resonating, which ones people are nodding their heads because they recognize it's happened at their business, sort of thing. And I always adapt. So I have a wonderful library of customer experience examples. No 2 presentations are the same because I customize it to the audience, but I also bring in examples and take out examples based on audience feedback. So that's been fun. And then I've been getting to consult with some great companies, kind of leveraging the experience that I have, having run marketing departments or teams at 3 different companies, and really having seen it all from my direct mail days all the way up to my social media days and everything in between. Other than television, I can't really advise anyone on TV. But other than that, any sort of digital marketing and customer experience is definitely my game.
Brilliant. And I know I'm picking this out of your bio, slightly off question, but just tell us, Dan held a senior role at McDonald's for digital strategy globally on the social media side. Could you tell us what that role was and the experience? McDonald's is one of my favorite companies. I reference it a lot. The greatest small business in the world type of thing. And I'm actually spoiler alert here as well. I'm actually going to the McDonald's Expo in October in Leeds. I've already applied and to explore, see whether we're going to go and take a McDonald's franchise on, and as part of our sort of conglomerate sort of businesses that we have. And it's early stages. You fill in the forms. You're going to make available the funds or whatever it would be, and then we're going to go to the opening day and we're going to get interviewed, and that's October in Leeds, UK. So I'm really excited to go and do that because I've studied McDonald's and understand it so much for so many years. And I'd just love to sort of, tap into your brain about what it was like running social on across the globe for that organization.
Sure. Well, first of all, good luck in October.
I'm going to need it.
I hope you get it. But it is such an interesting organization because it is so big and there are so many franchises around the world. Basically, what my work was, I was the head of global social media. And on the global side, it's much more of an advisory role than it is, a tactical social media role, because every country has its own social media presence. And its own social media strategy. Some of them are better than others at how they do it. And of course, as you might have noticed, while the food is meant to be very consistent across the globe, the experience can be different. And that may be intentional based on what the expectations are of the local customer base. And so similarly, the experience on social media is quite different across the different countries. And my team was there to try to help create some consistency, try to provide resources so that it made the franchises jobs a little bit easier on the social front, and then trying to provide best practices from our own knowledge, having worked at other places, and our knowledge of the rest of the network, and sort of identifying, oh, hey, the UK did something really cool. Let's share that with the rest of the network because they might be able to replicate it. So it was fascinating in the sense that it is such a big machine. Getting things to change is really difficult, as we were talking about, at a big company, and especially a company that has done a lot of the same things the same way for decades. And I think that was a pretty interesting challenge, is kind of the combination of a historical legacy company trying to be hip and relevant in the 21st century.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, and I do appreciate the insights into it. And it's an exciting but nervous time for us as we look to maybe move out of what I call B2B into restaurants and food in part of our sort of range of services. And no doubt I will let you know how I go on that side, whether they throw me straight out or we actually manage to get through to the next round. But really, and when I always see somebody associated with McDonald's, it always sort of lights my eyes up, because, whether you believe that the food is good, bad, or indifferent, the policies around it, whatever, but I just love the way that the model works. And, even today, the kids, they won't eat, but they see a McDonald's, suddenly they're hungry and their eyes light up, and the brand association, it is what it is. So what I'd highly encourage you to do is go check out Dan's book, Winning at Social Customer Care. There's a link in the app and the show notes as well. That's all about how top brands create engaging experiences on social media. Please check it out. And obviously go check out Dan's podcast as well, Experience This. I think, what are we up to now? 70 plus episodes or something on there, Dan, now? We started to move forward on that, and I took a little sneak preview into that podcast before we did it. How are you enjoying the podcasting? All good?
I love it. We are actually going to be, we were on hiatus over the summer, but by the time this episode airs, season 4 will have started, and it'll be another 16 episodes, and it's just super fun. Similar to what I was telling you about what I try to do on stage, the concept is that if we're talking to people about experience, we have to create a listening experience. And so the idea behind the show is that it's actually different from any other kind of business show. And not that any other kind of business show is wrong, just that we felt like we had a duty to do something different. So actually the first thing we decided was we weren't going to do any interviews. And so when we have guests, we actually have them pre-record 2 minutes of audio about a certain topic. And then Joey and I riff on that topic. And so it's just a different kind of listening experience. 3 segments every show. So we basically get to tell 3 different stories. So if you don't like the first one, you can fast forward to the second one. But I love it. I think it's so fun. And as we were talking about before about creating content, it's another place where, your show notes can become a blog post and others, because I understand people don't always listen to podcasts. Shame on you if you don't listen to podcasts, but clearly your audience does, because they're here. But I have a lot of fun doing it. I think it's a great medium.
And I love it as well. And it's such a growth opportunity. We were looking at the stats. In June 2018, Apple recorded over 500,000 podcasts available on the channel. June 2019, over 700,000. So wow. 200,000 growth in podcasts. That's just on the Apple platform. Obviously, like this show and like Dan's show, you Stitcher, Acast, TuneIn, Spotify, all the regular channels. But that's just a stat from, Apple. But, it's a great Audible brand. We can turn this into content, semi-post, it's snippet interviews, questions, and it's just such a great thing. And, I always class it down. I'm not sure about you, but it's one of my highlights of the week doing podcasts because I want to class it as a public service for my audience. But number two, I get to learn off great people like yourself, and it helps me develop. And, you start to build that global connection of people. And, it's just such a great way to work. And, I highly recommend it. If you guys have got any, questions about running, starting, managing a podcast, shoot me a message, use the hashtag #TheOpenMic, leave me a comment below. We'll get you helped out and we'll put you in the right path in some art.
And by the way, Mike, my first podcast was an interview podcast, and I really enjoyed that too for exactly the reason you said. I got to meet such interesting people at really cool brands. They've formulated a lot of the stories that I now tell on stage or what have you, and like you said, it extended my network and what have you. So, if you're interested in creating a podcast, it's really not that hard. You don't need a lot of equipment. It's not very expensive, and finding people. Probably the hardest work actually is finding people to and scheduling with them, but it's just a ton of fun. So highly recommend.
That's it. Absolutely. Well, thanks again for that, Dan. You can also check out Dan, as I say, on the social media. We'll put the links below. Dan has also been named in several notable industry lists, including Top 100 Digital Marketers in 2019 by both Brand24 and BuzzSumo. Top Customer Service Influencers 2018 by Fit Small Business, 15 Influencers Changing the CX, Customer Experience, by WalkMe, 50 Social Media Marketing Influencers, followed by Top Rank Marketing. There's some great accolades in there, Dan, to support the BA in Psychology and Communications, and you come out of the University of Pennsylvania. And you're a lifelong Cubs fan, I understand, as well, and a licensed bartender and pinball wizard. I've got to learn more about that.
Well, I am a lifelong Cubs fan, which up until 2016 was a very difficult thing to be, but then we finally got our championship. And I went to bartending school right after college. I was working full time, but I went at night only because I wanted to learn the skill. Yep. And I only spent, I did do some weekend bartending for a few years, but that was never the intention. But today it is still, many years later, it's still a skill that I have. And when people come over, I love to drink.
Mix the drinks.
Yeah, it's just
pinball, was it? Well, what is that? You just said, well, those nuts for pinball, like you grew up with it, and I love pinballs. I'm rubbish at it, but I love them. And if you ever see them, you always put a coin in there and have a go with them. But is it just a fascination with them, or do you like the older ones, the new ones, the digital ones, or what is it about that?
Well, I definitely prefer, I don't like the digital one, so we'll cross that one off the list. But I grew up with two of them in my basement, and that really kind of got me hooked. And then, and as a kid, once we got past like Pac-Man, I was never really good at video games, but I loved the physical nature of pinball. There happened to be an arcade at the University of Pennsylvania that I went to all the time. And now that I'm a little bit older and a homeowner and I have my own basement, I have not only acquired my parents' 2 pinball machines, but I've added 3 more of my own.
Oh, wow. What's your favorite one?
My favorite one is the Addams Family, which is a lot of people's favorite ones. It was one of the very first to be tied to a movie. It's got the voices from the actors in the movie, and it's just a super, super fun game.
That's Angelica Houston and Raul Julia, I believe.
You got it, yep.
Yeah, that's it. That's going back. Yeah, absolutely. Well, best of luck with that. And it's amazing. There's a bit of a Sam Malone thing going off here from Cheers, I think, there, because there's the baseball connection with the sporting thing and the bartender thing and things like that. So for the younger audience, if you're not quite sure what I'm referencing, just go search Cheers. That's the big show before Friends came out and in the 80s and into the early 90s. So, Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure learning a little bit more about it. So let's just dig a little bit deeper as we wrap into the podcast. we talk about how remarkable customer experiences can be your best marketing. Let's sort of dig it a little bit deeper into that. To the listeners, it may sound obvious, but however, why is customer experience so important to companies today, and why should they just get hold of it and then put some budget aside, deal with it or whatever? Because it's one of those things. If it's not sales and it's not the building's not burning down or whatever, or it'll wait. Or sometimes I see it so much when I sit on boards and I see how people just push aside sometimes the most important things, and customers are customers, and they complain about the sales line or the complaint record, but they just don't seem to be able to grasp the nettle and deal with it. So why is it so important, Dan, and how can people get it on the radar and get on with it, I suppose?
Well, I think besides from what I said before, that ultimately I think most industries are going to end up competing on customer experience. So it's going to be the thing that differentiates you. I think one of the key things that's happened, so one of the reasons I love talking about customer experience and marketing, and specifically in social media, is because I believe that the advent of social media is what caused this current focus on customer experience, because social media was and is the first marketing channel where people can talk back to you. Yeah. And when customers got a voice, they decided to use the voice. And granted, they started using it to complain about things. That was certainly part of it. But they also used their voice to set their expectations of what kind of experience that they want. And the reality for almost every company is that you're not being compared against your competitors anymore. You're being compared against whatever the last great experience I had was. Yeah. And, sometimes that might be an amazing waiter at a restaurant, or it might be a really easy digital experience that I had, or it might be Amazon, refunding my pots and pans. But your competition is that experience, because as a consumer, I say, well, hey, I can get such a great experience over here. Why can't I get it from you? Yeah. And I think that's why it becomes so important. But let's get to brass tacks, because executives listening to the show are going to be like, yeah, great, but I care about the bottom line. And here's why customer experience matters to the bottom line. It actually matters to both parts of the bottom line. It matters to revenue because when you have happy customers, they have longer tenure, they're going to stay with you, and they're going to refer their friends. So you're going to increase revenue because your current customers are going to stay longer, spend more, and bring on new customers. You're also going to reduce costs because when you screw up the customer experience, people have to call your call center, or they have to email you or tweet at you or chat with you, and that's all costing you money. As you eliminate pain points in your organization, which in turn improves the experience, you're also bringing your costs down of having to deal with all of those problems.
Which is straight to the bottom line.
Which is straight to the bottom line. So I do believe that customer experience is also one of the most critical things. There's a great report that comes out every year, gets updated every year by a company called Watermark Consulting. Yep. And they look at the leaders of the Forrester Customer Experience Index, the leaders and the laggards, the top and the bottom of the list, and only public companies, and they compare it to the S&P 500. And every year what they find is that the customer experience leaders, the ones that have won the top ranks from Forrester, are crushing the market, and the laggards are way behind the market. It happens every year, I think, for the last 11 years. So there is a big financial impact to getting customer experience right.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, think about it, keep your customers happy. Customers make paydays happen as well as everything else. And like you say, great point, Dan, where, you're having to do less administration to solve or unravel the problem. And, that's taking the focus away. So great point. If I'm a CEO out there today, I'm maybe in a new role, I want to make an impression at my new business, or I've just had enough, Dan, and I want to say, right, I'm up for it there. Can you explain the different kinds? Apologies. If I want to get started, what's just some simple ways that I could improve my customer experience without, maybe without a budget to hire a CX, or something? What could I do right now in the gate to start improving customer experience?
Well, I think the first thing is listen to your customers, because they're going to tell you what they like and dislike about the experience. And listen for complaints because those are areas of opportunity for you to fix, but also listen for compliments because those are things you should be doing more of, right? So if people like something that you're doing, keep doing it, right? And figure out how to do more of it. So I think listening is probably the best way to start. And then I would focus on the low-hanging fruit. And there is usually an orchard of low-hanging fruit at most companies because there's so many parts of the experience that frankly are broken that you can kind of pick any of them to fix. I want to give you an example of something that I did when I was at Discover Card that really was not particularly difficult, but had a huge impact. So we had a survey mechanism on our website, which was not a pop-up annoying one, but it was just at the bottom of every page. And on any page of the website, you could click on it and you could leave a comment. And we got hundreds of comments every day because we had 50 million logins a month. So this was, a pretty popular site. And yet I got these reports every day with the comments and I couldn't sift through them. My brain couldn't handle that many comments and it's hard to find patterns and all that. And I mean, unless the website was down or there was something really big happening. So we added a question to the survey, which actually came straight from the Forrester Customer Experience Index. We said, how easy was it to do business with Discover today? And it was I think it was a 5-point scale, might've been a 7-point scale. So after about a month of collecting this data, I ran a report and I listed all of the pages of our website, thousands of pages on the website, and I listed them in order of that ease score, of the easiness score, right? And I obviously listed it in reverse order. I wanted to know what were the most difficult pages. So the number one most difficult page that shows up was very surprising because it was actually a critical page. It was the refer a friend page. So this is where we ask you to give us your friends' names and emails and they get $50, you get $50. And that was the number one hardest page. We're like, well, what's wrong? We go and we look at the page, looks fine to me. Well, then we digged into the comments just from that page, right? So instead of seeing 1,000 comments every day and not being able to sift, I'm looking just at that page and it became crystal clear. For one particular browser, the submit button was not showing up. And that was really angering a lot of people. They're filling out the form and then they don't know what to do with it. Well, overnight we fixed that. That was like one line of code. And immediately that page became an easy to use page, right? And I was like, well, wow, that was so easy. Let's do it again and again and again. And we actually did it for the top 100 pages, or I should say the bottom 100 pages. And that was the year that Discover for the very first time won the J.D. Power Award for customer satisfaction, took it away from Amex. And for almost 40% of that score was due to website experience. So I attribute that project to making a huge impact. And all we did was get rid of little annoyances. We didn't change anything big. And so it wasn't, an 8-month long technology project. It was, most of them were a couple lines of code to fix. And I think that's a great way to start because every time we annoy a customer, we run the risk of them saying, that's it. That's the straw that breaks the camel's back. I'm going to your competitor, right? And so we just have to spend time not annoying our customers. And even if you haven't yet gotten to the point of creating a remarkable experience, at least you're not creating a bad experience. I think that, frankly, is where I would start.
That's great. And I love that question, which is, which part of the experience today was easy for you or bad? Just that simple question, because people can get it straight away. How easy was it to deal with our business or to do business with our company today? I really appreciate that. You mentioned earlier on social how people find a voice, Dan, whether it's today, whether we're watching the sports, the game, we've had a good or bad or a medium experience in a shopping mall. People are not too eager, but I suppose, like you say, that's where they chat back. They can go and just literally, review you, or whether it's review site or on social or whatever it would be. So tell us a little bit more. Can you explain the different kinds of experiences that are shared on social media and obviously what companies should be looking at around that?
Absolutely. Well, when we think about sharing experiences on social media, the first thing we tend to think about are complaints. And there are a lot of complaints that are shared on social media. And it's unfortunate because it means that there's a lot of people having bad experiences. Yeah. Now, we also see some positive experiences being shared. We don't see as many of them. And I think the reason for that is obvious, is that as consumers, we just don't have very many positive experiences to share.
Yeah.
But the research shows that people are actually more willing to share positive experiences than negative experiences. We just have to give them those experiences to share. And that's what I talk about on stage, and that's what I consult about, is I teach you how to create these positive experiences that people want to share. Now, the reverse of your question, what don't people share? They don't share an average experience. Because who wants to tell anyone about an average experience, or as the millennials like to say, meh, right? A meh experience or a so-so experience. Who in the world is going to share that? They're not, that's not something you want to brag about. People love to share things at both ends of the spectrum. They love to share when they have a really bad experience because they want everybody's sympathy and they want to embarrass the brand and whatever. And they also love to share positive experiences because they're excited that it happened to them. They want other people to sort of envy them. And so there's this same desire on positive and negative. The challenge then is how do you change the average sentiment, the overall sentiment, to be more about positive than negative? And I think, again, the two ways to do that are stop annoying customers, which will reduce the negative. And then how do you move some of those average meh experiences over to positive, which is what I mean when I say creating a remarkable experience. Remarkable is an intentional word. It literally means worthy of comment, right? And so when you create an experience that's worthy of comment, people are more than willing to tell their friends and family, whether it's on social media or frankly, just in real life. Word of mouth is just as important. There was a study that my friend Jay Baer did that found that half of word of mouth is still offline. So we think of it only as social media, but there's still tons of word of mouth that happens just at cocktail parties or talking with the neighbor, and that's just as important.
Yeah. Do you know what? Out of all of that, Dan, that's amazing. And it's just something flashback that's totally unrelated, but it's related to the average comment that you mentioned. And for the listeners, Dan covered there about, people will, complain and we talked about the hassle and the cost it is to manage those, but how willing people are to do the positive experience and just to take time out and say, what a great experience customer Clark X said, or, service Y did, or whatever it would be. But what flashed back in the middle when you said people don't share average experiences. That is so right. If you flash back to Grant Cardone's book, The 10X Rule, and he talks about how to be successful. And I think he gives an example about a surgeon. And he goes, hey, and he says, you don't go out there saying that you're an average surgeon and you get average operating results and average, hygiene records in your surgery. You either go out and what an amazing surgery if I had plastic surgery or medical surgery, or I had a real bad experience, they left the scalpel inside and sewed me up or whatever it would be. But it's so right. And that's what Dan was talking, that's what Grant Cardone was talking about in the sales element. But as that flushes through, it's exactly the same. They're either positive, negative, and I think most people do want to have that positive experience and share it. And that part about the offline is so right. On the golf course, who you're dealing with for this, the personal referrals, the building the networks. And I think that, for the listeners out there, don't just think about this being online. Great point, and keep it offline. Give them something, positive to be positive about, and you'll get the benefit. So that's an amazing thing. And thanks for reminding me about the average there. Nobody wants to be average. It's so real. From your expert perspective, Dan, as we start to move out of the back end of the podcast here, share some examples of companies who are absolutely giving that remarkable customer experience. Who's your favorites out there at the moment?
Well, one that I absolutely love on, and I would say I get more positive feedback from audiences and other people I talk to when I mention this brand is called Chewy. And Chewy is a public company. It's a pet supplies website, chewy.com. And what Chewy does so remarkably well is get to know each and every one of its customers. And it understands that its customers are both human and animal, right? And it treats them, that way. And so one of the things I love to share, a great example is a customer service email, which I deemed in a Forbes post the greatest customer service email in the history of customer service, which I know is a big statement. But the long and short of it is a woman wrote a a negative review on their website about some cat litter. Now, this is not a Chewy branded cat litter. Think of Chewy as an Amazon in this case. They're just selling the product. So she leaves a negative review because the litter was not particularly effective for her long-haired cat. About a day later, she gets an email from Chewy that says, "Hey, we noticed you left a negative review. We're so sorry for your experience. We've gone ahead and refunded your money for the litter," which she never asked for, right? Then the agent says, "I've also done some research for you, and I found 4 other litters that I think might be better for your long-haired cat," and she includes links to those litters. Then she says, she tells the customer that she should feel free to donate the litter, to, the litter she doesn't like, to, I think it was to an animal shelter. And she says, "By the way, give our love to Roma." Now think about that for a minute. The customer service email that she got knew her cat's name. And said to give her love to Roma. And then she goes on to say that they have a little board, kind of like you do in your office, a board where they like to put up pictures of their customers' pets. And if she wouldn't mind sending a picture of Roma, she'd love to put her up on the board. Now, I ask you, the next time this customer who was dissatisfied with the product she bought, the next time she goes to buy kitty litter, where do you think she's going to buy it from? Right?
Straight back to Chewy.
Yeah. And so it's just, another friend of mine, a high school friend of mine, wrote to me and said that when his cat died, that Chewy sent him flowers. Now, this is to a customer that by definition is no longer a customer because his pet died. But guess what? A year later, he got another cat and he's right back being a Chewy customer. So what I love about that, this whole idea of even treating customers who are leaving and giving them a good exit experience is so critical, because you never know when they're going to be back. They may think the grass is greener on the other side, and then they go to your competitor. They don't like them either, and then they're back.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
I think they're a company that's doing really well. And a big company that I'll mention just because it's so prevalent and I do think we can learn from it is Starbucks.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning the retailer and the guy who was running the cashier.
Yeah, Wix, Bill McGrath. Yeah.
Wix, yeah. There's a great story in one of Howard Schultz's books when early days, as people may know the history of Starbucks, it's sort of based off the Italian cafes. And so they really meant to this whole concept of a third place and enjoying a coffee.
There's home, there's work, there's Starbucks.
Exactly. And there were some factors associated with Italian cafes that I guess I would say were a little hoity-toity, a little uppity, right? And they came to the U.S. And one of those was this feeling that skim milk was an absolute no-no in a coffee. That ruins the coffee. We can't have it. So Starbucks originally didn't offer skim milk. And there's a story in Schultz's book where he's sitting at a Starbucks just enjoying a coffee and watching all the customers. And a woman comes in and she's just been jogging. She's in a sports suit and she orders a coffee with skim milk. The barista tells her, "Sorry, we don't have skim milk." And the woman turns and walks away and leaves. And he said the very next day, he made the edict to the entire network to start serving skim milk. And I love that because number one, again, same kind of thing, Howard Schultz, $1 million guy, and he's sitting there watching customers himself. But he's also willing to not be right. He doesn't have to stand on the principles of no skim milk. You know what? If this woman wants skim milk, we're going to offer it. And now it's hilarious. Now you can get like 19 different kinds of milk in your coffee. But the other thing that Starbucks does so well that I want people to think about in their own business is Starbucks puts the entire experience together really well. Their baristas are friendly. The coffee is tasty. The atmosphere is nice. It's clean. It's got good music. It's comfortable. The Wi-Fi is really good. The rewards program is amazing. It is the most integrated rewards program of any company in the world. A lot of people don't know this, but when you, in the United States, when you look at the list of the top prepaid card players, Starbucks is on that list. And they're not a bank, but it's because they have created a prepaid card that links to their app, that links to their rewards program. Everything flows so easily. I will tell you, it is the only company I do business with that I pay with my phone. I don't particularly like paying with my phone, but I do it at Starbucks because they make it so easy. So any company you're in, any industry you're in, put your whole experience together so that it all flows, and then you get a Starbucks-like experience.
Yeah, that's great. The same Howard Schultz is when the recession came and the major recessions and everybody were cutting back. Howard Schultz is out there visiting every single store, sat, like you say, watching his customers. And I think that's in the book as well, where he's actually out there learning from his customers and improving customer experience and investing in that. So I get it all the way. That's a great example. Thanks for sharing it. And I love the Starbucks. We have it here in the UK as well, in Europe, where you got the app on there. And I think every 15 coffees you get a free one or a free, and then they'll send you, gifts for like, treats and cakes and things like that. So,
and this, by the way, just back to your other question about sort of the business value. This is why they can charge what they charge for coffee, and people are willing to pay it, right? Because it's not just a cup of coffee; it's an experience.
That's an experience, yeah. That's an amazing statement. Dan, I know we covered it earlier about, for those, wanting to get started, sort of simple ways to improve customer experience. And, you talked about listening to your customers and attacking that low hanging fruit. But, sometimes we get a lot of the early stage businesses and they'll say, Mike, I just don't afford to employ anybody. I haven't got a budget. I haven't got any people, I haven't got any resources. Is there anything that, you could just sort of think outside of the listening? Is there anything else you want to add to that about, if they're just flat broke out there, but really committed and dedicated? What can they do to get started, and really make that additional drive over listening and attacking that low-hanging fruit? Could you just expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so definitely every meeting that you're in, make sure the customer's there with you, even if in spirit. I think that's the first thing. And then focus on the things that don't cost money to change, right? You can rewrite your marketing emails or your welcome email or whatever. That doesn't cost you anything. I mean, especially if you have an internal person doing it. You can, again, with things like signage, but I would focus digitally because I think most digital changes can be pretty simply done. Or things like, let's say, you've got packaging and you're already paying for the packaging and there's already something written on the box. So writing something new on the box is not going to cost you anymore, right? If it's on the same side of the box. So write something that's quirky or witty that will get your customers' attention. One of the businesses I do business with now, I get a subscription box every week from them. And literally reading the box is fun because they got so many cool things on it. And that's an experience too. And it really doesn't cost
you already pay for the print on the paper or the cardboard. Yeah.
Sure. If you've already printed your logo, which you probably have, to print a few extra words is not going to cost you anything. So those are the things that I would look for. Just there's plenty of opportunities. If you are running let's say a mom and pop retail shop, right? Put a bowl of candy out for the kids, or train your receptionist or your cashier to just smile more or to ask people how their day is going. These are all things that are free as well.
And they stand out, don't they? The people go, oh, yeah, I'm really good. Yeah, it's thanks for asking, and people do respond to that. I see that.
Of course, versus what you typically see, which is next in line, please. And so you can stand out just from something like that, and it doesn't have to require budget. So I don't want people to think that customer experience requires a massive multi-million-dollar overhaul. And for some companies it might, but for most companies it really doesn't. It's about finding those little moments. Google refers to them as micro moments, which I think is a great word. Find those little places where you can just be a little bit more memorable and remarkable, and likely you don't have to spend any money to do it.
No, that's great. I really appreciate it, Dan. That's absolutely pearls of wisdom there. Thank you very much indeed. So as we wrap out of the show, we've covered so much, Dan, here. We've talked about the freebie stuff. We've talked about the large corporates. Let's summarize up in 3 sort of tips here. I'm sat here, I'm a CEO, I'm ready to get going. What's the top 3 things you want me to concentrate on right now so I can go out there, with a committed effort to improve my customer experience? So, to create that remarkable customer experience, let's summarize those up.
Sure. So I think I'm going to tell you that number one is listening, and
Definitely.
and that is listening to the positive and the negative, and reacting accordingly. Number two is to become a customer of your own company, and so that is the Wix guy became an employee. Howard Schultz, I think, was a customer, but being an actual customer, sign up for your product, fill out the application form, read the welcome email, call your own customer service as a customer. Don't let them know that you're the executive. Don't ask to be treated differently. Call from an unknown phone number if you have to, but be a customer. And then, because we're all consumers, so we all know what we personally enjoy in an experience.
Yeah.
We're often not consumers of our own company, though. And I think that's a huge miss. And so that would be the second thing. And the third, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, is always respond to your customers. Now that's in social media, which is what my book is about, but really in any format that customers are taking time out of their day to call you or email you or chat with you or post on social media. If they're taking time out of their day to communicate with you, it is because they care. If they didn't care and they had a bad experience, they would just simply leave for your competitor. So the fact that even when they complain, they're looking for resolution. They want to keep doing business with you. And it's up to you to decide whether you want their revenue to keep coming in the door or not. And I'm still surprised at how many companies are not responding on social media to either complaints or compliments. And I always tell people, compliments trip people up because we're so used to looking at customer service as only dealing with problems. And all of a sudden, again, when customers got a voice in social media, they started complimenting too. Now, nobody ever called a call center and said, just to tell them and worked their way through the IVR just to tell them they were doing a great job. But people do post on social media about that. And the simplest thing, like a like or a retweet or a thank you or a we love you too, goes so long with people because they know that you're listening and they know that you care. So listen, become a customer, and respond.
Yeah, and I know we didn't get a full, to cover that response part, but what we're talking about in the most, Danny, is the social listening element. And there's tools out there like Mention and Google Alerts, for the more published stuff. But Mention, what's your take on live chat? Slightly off script, Dan, what's your take on, we get asked a lot, should I have live chat on my website? Should I have it as a bot to pre-qualify? Should I have a human on there? And I know it's limited to maybe 24/7 or working hours, whatever. But what's your take on that? Do you think that's a good part to improve customer service?
Yeah, chat is really growing. Chat and messaging are really growing in popularity, mostly due to Facebook Messenger, and in the US at least, Twitter DM is pretty popular, but also all the other messaging apps around the world. It's becoming a really popular method, and I think it's a great method for both companies and consumers. Why companies like it is that it's private, so you don't have complaints coming out in public in social media like you used to. Why customers like it is because the whole chat history is there, so they don't have to repeat themselves, which is the number one complaint that people have about customer service. They don't even, when I communicate with my hotel chain, I don't even have to give them my loyalty number because, several things up in the conversation, I gave them my loyalty number once, so now they never have to ask again. So
Virgin are really good at that as well. Virgin on Virgin Fly Experience, I can see your number, Mr. Midgley, on your Virgin. I can see your book here. And Virgin as well, if you go and book a Virgin holiday, whether you do it online, you do it over the phone, or you do it in a store, it all links together. And, you go into the store, you maybe ring the call center afterwards or whatever, and they've got it. And that's another connected experience. So a big kudos and shout out to how they do it. So I do get that there. But so you think that live chat's good? What's your take on bots? Just before we wrap out, do you think it's a bit impersonal or?
Yeah, very quickly. I have not yet found a bot that I really like. But I would say, look, bots are fine for answering routine, repetitive, mundane questions, but consumers today crave human interaction. And so any bot has to have a handoff to a human that is seamless if necessary. And I don't think that bots are going to replace customer service agents because I think the consumers of today won't allow it. And so, if somebody's asking how many calories in a Big Mac and it's something basically they could Google, sure, a bot can answer that. Yeah. But as soon as you get into a more complicated problem, I highly recommend that you have the bot help the human agent. That's where they're going to be most valuable. If you think about the human agent using a bot to help them solve the problem so that they can focus on being with the customer, that's where I think you'll find more value than trying to replace your human agents.
That's amazing, Dan. Thank you so much. I know we threw a couple of extra questions at you there, and I appreciate you covering those. It's always good to get your insights. So I hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. You've got some awesome insights how to get started, improve, use strategies that global leaders as well as small companies can really take leverage, by being connected and bringing that Striper customer service through your business to get improving with it to, really create a remarkable customer experience. And that's going to be your best marketing. As always, if you want to check out more, you can get and follow Dan online at Twitter through @dgingiss. LinkedIn is just Dan Gingiss after the LinkedIn extension. Instagram is dgingiss, and website is dangingiss.com. Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know we overrun a little bit here, but I've so much value you've given. Thank you for being on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you, Mike. And if I can ask one other thing of your listeners, when they use your hashtags, growth engine, get in the game, go do the hustle, go make it happen, if you'd be willing to share a remarkable experience that you've had recently, I'm going to follow those hashtags. I always love new examples. I love to add to my library. So if you've had one that really stuck out to you, I would be really interested in hearing it.
No, absolutely. We'll make sure that gets done. And we'll obviously post out your hashtags as well there, Dan. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike.
So we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, guys. We know what it means to you. Thanks for tuning to this episode and continuing your growth engine development. As always, to get in the game, go do the hustle, go make it happen. And we're going to see you on the next Open Mic podcast real soon.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.